Well, this week we are continuing on our toaster pastry theme and making ones that have bites out of them or have been broken in two so that you can see what flavor they are. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this project is. All right, last week for our tutorial, we made these toaster pastries, and these are the entire toaster pastry like it would come out of the box. This one's toasted, these are like straight out of the box. And obviously you could make any of them look toasted, but today we are going to make ones that are broken open. I'm going to try and show you a bitten off one so that you can have it like the dolls have taken a bite, but definitely one that's broken in two. So for that, we need to make our filling. So the first step we're going to do is mix our filling. Now it's mostly translucent. When working with a translucent clay, number one, I find every brand of translucent clay mixes up a little bit differently. So I almost always mix my translucent and my color and then bake a little tiny piece of it off to check the color. And I'm going to start out with about 1 part of a red, kind of a brightish red. I don't know what color this is. It's the bright red that was in my clay storage bin, but it didn't have its label with it anymore. I'm running really low and I've lost the label. And then I have about 8 parts of a translucent clay. So I'm going to mix these together off camera. Then I'm going to come back and show you what color I get and how it bakes up. So I will be back as soon as this is mixed and I've done that. All right, here's the color I got from that amount of clay. And here is how it bakes off. This is why I always recommend baking up translucent clay so you can see the color. And that's a color I'm very, very happy with. I'm going to take part of this. I'm not going to work with all of it at once because I'm not sure how many I'm going to make. But I'm going to roll this out pretty flat. We're not ready to start working with it yet. I'm going to add some sand. Now all I have is white sand and that's fine. It's not going to, the color of the sand won't make a difference. I'm going to dip this in here. And this is the white sand I use quite often for different things. What this is going to do, it's going to give that texture that the inside of a toaster pastry has. So I'm going to work this through the clay. It'll probably take me a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off, get this all worked in, and then I'll be back. All right, that's all worked in now, and you can test it by kind of breaking everything apart, see if it adds a little bit of texture. So now I'm going to roll this out. I'm going to use the same sticks that I did last week. I'm not going to do all of this on camera. We did this, let's get a little bit of cornstarch on my tray so it doesn't stick too badly. This is the same process we used last week. We're just substituting, at this point, we're substituting the red clay for the extra layer of the dough color. I will put a link to last week's blog post in the blog post for today to give you the dimensions of these patterns. We're going to use the same patterns we used last week. I'll cut a couple of these now, and then I'm going to roll this out a couple of times off camera and see how many of the filling pieces I can get. Once I get that done, I'm going to take the same dough color I used last week for these guys, and I'm going to use the bigger pattern, and I'm going to make, for each one of these, I'll need 2 of these. So I'm going to get all that work done off camera. When I get that all done, I'll come back and I'll show you the next step. All right, so I've had enough clay to make 4 Pop-Tarts. So that's what I'm going to make. I'm only going to make the one flavor today. I don't know if I said that earlier or not. I put these all on a parchment paper simply so I can move them out of my way easier. So let's put a little bit of cornstarch on the tray. Now remember, if you didn't watch last week's video, I do recommend you go back and watch that. The link for that will be at the, I'll try to remember to put it at the iCard at the top, but I'll also put it at the end of this video so that you can go back and watch how to make the basic toaster pastry. If you're not familiar with working with polymer clay, I do recommend that you watch my Polymer Clay 101 series, because I go into a lot of details about what I'm doing. I think I've even got one on the tiles that I use, the baking surfaces I use, and all different things about conditioning clay, working with clay. It's really a series that will help you to do your best at clay. Now, one thing to remember when you are moving your clay pieces on and off of your tile, use your knife. Don't try to pick them up without the knife. Now, I'm going to push this down, and I'm still using this ball tool, but like I said last week, you could use your finger. You could use the clean end of a handle of a paintbrush. We're just trying to get those two pieces of clay sealed down a bit. Take our original pattern, and I'm going to wipe that off. I have red clay on there somehow. I'm trying to do this keeping it under camera and also keeping my head out of the way. I did mark my camera view area today, so I'm hoping to see on camera better than I did last week. Last week I did have a few issues. Now, while this is still here, we're going to make some holes. I have this dotting tool. I believe it's a nail art dotting tool set that I got off of eBay for, I think it was under $2 for like 6 of them, I want to say. I don't remember for sure, but I use these all the time. You could also use a toothpick for this step, but I like to be able to hold on to the tool. I'm going to start by putting a hole here. Well, here, I'm actually going to get this one over here so I can kind of look at it. If it's not exact, it's okay, because we're going to put frosting on most of these, and then you won't see all the holes. You'll only see some of them. All right, I'm going to move this back to my parchment paper, because since I'm doing multiples, I don't want to get chalk on my tray and then have to come back and clean it and then build another toaster pastry. So I'll do it one more time on camera, and then I will turn the camera off and do the other two. So line that up, try to center it. Now, it's okay if these are a little bit misshapen at this point, because like you saw in the last one, we are going to trim them again. And I've noticed even the real toaster pastries, they're not perfect. And this does stretch out that clay a little bit when you do this step. All right, put this back in. And again, knife, whoops, almost forgot the little vent holes. On the first one, I like to start in the middle. I find it makes it easier to line everything up. All right, knife underneath, kind of use the knife to scrape it off the work surface and back onto the parchment. Okay, I'm going to repeat that with the other two toaster pastries, then I'll come back and we can start adding some color to them. All right, everything is ready to go. So now I have got my chalk prepared. This is artist chalk. Again, if you aren't familiar with how this works, go ahead and check out my Clay 101 series, because I have a video dedicated to how to use the chalks. And we don't want a lot of color on these. We're going to start with the yellow ochre color. We're only using 2 colors today. The yellow ochre. This just gives it a little bit of color. And I'm going to do the initial chalking just on the tops of all 4. I decided to leave them on the parchment because it'll just make it a little bit easier. And I'm brushing them on hard enough to push it into the clay without damaging my clay at all, without making marks in the clay. And this will take it from a raw dough-looking dough to something that looks like it's edible. Pick them up. Get the edges. And I like to get the bottom also. And repeat. The chalk dust will become a permanent part of the clay once the clay is baked. If it's done correctly, it will not wipe off. And we don't want to do a solid coat. We just want the edges done pretty well. We want it done fairly well, but we want some of the lighter clay to show. We don't want it to be a solid color of any color. And since they're all upside down, we'll start with the bottom on the next color. Now we're going to move to the darker color. And just around the edges. Just a little bit on the corners, going much lighter with this color. Get the corners, because the corners always brown a little more when you toast the toaster pastry than the rest of it does. All right, now a little bit on each corner. Up something with my brush. Okay, now back into the initial color, the yellow ochre color. And just kind of blend that on the top edge. You don't have to worry about the bottom as much. If you have enough chalk, go ahead and do the bottom, but it's not as important. Now on the last week's version, we baked them at this point. But for this week, because we're going to break these open, they need to go in the freezer and get really, really cold. So about probably 15 to 20 minutes in the freezer, and then they'll be ready to do our next step. So that's where mine are going now. I'm going to move them to the freezer, and I will be back when I have them nice and firm. All right, these have been in the freezer for about 15-20 minutes, so they're nice and cold, but more importantly, they're a little more firm than they were when we were looking at them earlier. First, I'm going to make a broken one, because I don't know about you guys, but when I eat a toaster pastry, I always break it in half. So I'm going to take a knife. I'm going to go start there. And I'm kind of angling my knife. I'm angling it towards the, so the bottom is not directly above. Now I'm going to, sometimes it'll break, sometimes it won't, and that's okay. I don't want a straight line. I want kind of a crooked line. I'm kind of trying to break part of it. There we go. Now, we want to take our pointy tool. This is just a dental pick. You could use a sewing pin, anything like that, and kind of just tease, support the top and the bottom of the toaster pastry with your fingers, between your fingers and your thumb. And just kind of tickle this. Barely, barely touching with the pointy tool. And you can kind of just draw a few lines in that center, in that filling. Oh, I like how this one looks where it's kind of torn. I'm going to poke that back in though. There we go. Now, again. All right, and I just remembered I forgot to grab something. So those are broken. I'm going to go get something and I'll show you how to make a bite. All right, I intended to get this before I turned the camera on for the last part, but I totally forgot. So this is a cookie cutter. This is only used for clay. It's from a cheap set of cookie cutters that I actually hated for making cookies, but I use them for doll food a lot. It's got, what you need is a cookie cutter that's got a scalloped edge on it. And I'm just going to pick, I don't like this end of this very well, so I'm going to do that. Well, don't need that one now. The doll's eaten that piece. And if you feel like you've got too much of a dent, you can go in and kind of cut off. I don't like exactly how that broke there. That's better. You can adjust it. Once again, teasing that dough a little bit to get some texture. Kind of make some lines in that. So I am going to go ahead and texture I'm going to break the other two in different ways, and then when I get done with that, I will bake these at the recommended temperature for 10 minutes, and then they need to come back down to room temperature, and when that happens, I'll come back and we'll put the frosting on. All right, these are all baked and they're back to room temperature, and that's really important for this step because we're going to put on our frosting, which again is liquid clay from Sculpey. I'm just using white because I'm making these all kind of a strawberry flavor. So you need to put on your clay, your liquid clay. And this time we have to be a little more careful because we don't want our liquid clay to run off the edge, where either on this one where the doll has bitten it or on the others where we've broken it. So I'm going to first bring some up just to that edge, but not over it. Now remember, this liquid clay stays wet until you bake it, just like polymer clay stays wet until you bake it. All right, do one of the bitten ones and one of the ones that are just broken in two. Make sure I'm under camera. And since this is supposed to be one that's broken in two, I need to be pretty careful that I get the icing lined up on each side of where it's broken. So I'm going to put these kind of together. Because I've roughed up the edge, they won't go completely together again. But just be patient with yourself. Work slowly. Go all the way to that edge and kind of eyeball where, like this one is trying to bend back. There we go. I'll just do two on camera. And then I have my little micro beads, because usually toaster pastries have some kind of stuff sprinkled on the top. I have a red and a green, which seems to be pretty typical for the strawberry flavor, which is what I'm kind of doing here. Be careful that you don't put too many on. These come out pretty quickly. And these, what these are, they're micro beads. They're no-hole micro beads. You can usually get them where stores that sell like rubber stamping and card making stuff. Just a few. They make a really good sprinkle for doll size cookies and cakes and things like these toaster pastries. And I've had these for, this brand is a Martha Stewart. I don't think these are being made anymore. But, okay, this bottle I've used the most, and it's down to here. And I've had these for probably 25 years. And that's how few I've used. So they are a little expensive, but they go a long ways because we're just using so few. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get these two finished off camera. I'm going to stick them back in the oven at the recommended temperature and bake them for another 15 minutes. When they are baked and cooled to room temperature, I'll come back and show you what they look like. And here are our toaster pastries. They're all baked off. And there's one next to the one from last week that was not cut. I love how these turned out. I think they are going to be so much fun to tell stories with your dolls. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, leave me a like, leave me a comment. What kinds of things would you like to see in future tutorials? If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed, I encourage you hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video. Be sure and check the blog post for more information and photos that I took along the way so that you can see how things are done. Thank you very much for watching today, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.